Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hands-On Logos podcast. This is where we discuss current events, personal growth, and any other random topic that crosses our minds. Our goal is to have a meaningful discussion that help us to see the topics we discuss more clearly. Our hope is we can help you expand your self-awareness, develop your critical thinking, and learn to be less reactive to the world around you. And most importantly, remember, be curious. If you like what you hear, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. We appreciate you. Hey, Chris. Hello.
Hello, Scott. How's it going?
Well, I'm just getting over my sickness, so my energy level may not be exactly where I want it, but I'm gonna try to fake it as much as possible. And so, let's get into it. What are we gonna talk about today?
You know, we talked about this a little bit, and I have notes, and then I forgot about everything we said we're going to talk about today. So
Okay, that's fine.
let me pull out my notes real quick.
Okay.
I got a whole bunch of varieties. Well, today's Valentine's Day.
Today is Valentine's Day. Yes, it is. Valentine's, right? Not
Valentine's Day. Does the rest of the world celebrate Valentine's Day? Does like Europe celebrate Valentine's? I know Japan does, but
Okay.
it's not the same.
Yeah, I don't know, Chris. I don't know much of anything, to be honest with you. You know, the
You're
more stuff I
self-aware
learn,
enough to admit that.
the more stuff I learn, the more you realize just how much you don't learn. Right now, the thing that's kind of kicking my butt is Greek, and so I'm supposed to, I don't even know if the camera can see this or not, but this is one of my Greek lessons, and is it showing up? So this is all the different forms of Amy: first person, second person, third person, singular, and then you got to learn the forms, first, second, and third persons plural, which means more than one. And so all of these words in Greek, they have endings that indicate what this is. It's a little different than English. So it's just a whole different thing. So what's that?
Valentine wasn't from the Greek era, right? Valentine was from later. Saint Valentine. The reason why I'm saying this is I'm wondering if you could say Happy Valentine's Day in Greek.
No, even if it was in Greek, I couldn't speak Greek, so it's like the answer would be no, that'd be like
You might be able to figure out how to write it.
I'm just pulling it up actually right now. It's interesting. So the
This
origin,
is Rome 273 is what came up for me.
yeah, I got one as a Christian feast day to honor Saint Valentine, a martyr who lived in 3rd century AD.
Yep.
Oh,
He
interesting.
died February 14th, so that's why they picked it, because he died on that day. February 14th, 273.
I don't know. I'd rather have somebody celebrate when I was born than when I died, but I guess okay.
Well, also celebrate things he did in his life, right? So that was.
Yeah, so
But
it's romance and love. Wow, okay.
so today in Toastmasters, Valentine's was one of the topics that was discussed,
Yes.
and I took a page out of your book. I was asked a question, and I
Yeah.
answered a different one.
Well, of course. Why would you answer the
So
question?
I did the politician thing. I took what they said and I pivoted to what I wanted to say.
Yeah. The standard political thing is like, no matter what the question is, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about moving forward, right?
Yeah. Well, so I told everyone about what Valentine's Day was like in Japan, which is
Oh.
totally different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's February 14th, but it was really created by the companies that wanted to sell chocolate.
Well, it's always like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Japan in general doesn't have a strong tie to Christian culture or history, so the idea of Saint Valentine, all this stuff wouldn't even exist there.
Well,
But
yeah, but this goes
they
way
had a
back.
lot of U.S. military was there after World War II, and they had a lot of influence for that. But in Japan, on Valentine's Day, the women give chocolate to every man in their life.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Everyone, your boss, your coworkers, your husband, your boyfriend, whatever, you
Yeah.
give chocolate.
Nice.
And so, but the men don't have to give chocolate to the women.
Oh, that's
It's
good. That's a holiday created by men for men.
well, so the funny thing is, and I was
Nice.
mentioning this, is they have this stuff called giri chocolate, Giri,
Yeah.
chocolate. Giri is obligational, so it's obligational chocolate.
Yeah.
And basically, there are all kinds of chocolates being sold for that day, and women will go in and buy one piece of chocolate that's packaged really nicely in this little box that costs, I don't know, $4 or $5 each,
Yeah.
and they'll hand those out to the people at work, to their boss, to whatever.
Gotcha.
Usually then they would buy a nicer gift, a bigger box, a nicer box for their significant other, is
Yeah.
the general way it works. But you got to remember, a lot of women in Japan, they only work till they get married. So they're not making a lot of money. They're not in high level positions. So a
Yeah.
woman might be making $1,500, $2,000 a month and spending 400 or 500 in dollars on chocolate for February.
Hey man, that's marketing. You got to spend to get, you know?
Yeah. And the funny, so this is the way it is. So, even when I was working in a company that wasn't technically, it was Japanese owned, but it wasn't following all the Japanese rules. They'd still hand out chocolate, and I thought it was a weird thing to have.
Yeah.
But they did try to find another way to sell more chocolate, and they created a day on March 14th, a month later, called White Day. And
Winter.
this was a day where men were supposed to buy chocolate for women, but
Oh.
only for your significant other.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So it's just culturally an interesting thing that's different. It's designed to sell as much chocolate as possible, but the way they've implemented it is totally different.
Well, that's the idea of everything. Sell as much crap as you can to other people, actually. Yeah, that's too bad we live in that society, actually. But that's the essence of marketing. It's to make you feel like something's wrong with you or you're broken. But it's basically we try to sell into the seven deadly sins, right?
But isn't
And
that by need as well? I mean, if you think 200 years ago, a family, a person would have been much more self-sufficient than we are today. They'd be growing their own stuff, they'd be
yeah,
making their own stuff. They might be bartering with a guy down the street, down the
yeah,
road, up the
yeah,
street, and for his leather work, his
yeah,
metal work, whatever, right? It wasn't the idea because today, if you said, you should only buy the essentials. The essentials are a lot of things that in the past you wouldn't have had to have bought.
yeah,
The
right,
economy
right.
has grown to all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, you wouldn't be buying as much food because you'd be making so much of the food. You
yeah,
wouldn't be
you're
buying
making
as
so
much
much.
clothing because you'd be making a lot of the clothing. You'd be buying the cloth. But I think that the need then, as we've industrialized and gotten more specialized to buy these items,
Yeah,
means now there is a market to
yeah.
distinguish these items.
There's a
Better
marketing
quality,
thing.
worse quality, more colorful, less colorful.
Yeah,
And then from there, we start building images that go with it.
yeah,
Brand name versus non-brand name.
yeah.
I mean,
Right. Yeah, I think the biggest I don't know the biggest one. I mean, business biggest success for the marketing industry and kind of the slimiest thing was the whole idea of diamonds. You know, diamonds actually don't have a whole lot of value. Um, but it's beautiful. They made, oh, you want to impress your woman, buy her a diamond. And just as a rule of thumb, we're at 2 months worth of salary. That's what you should be spending.
I heard it was 3 months.
Oh, I don't know.
Your engagement ring was supposed to be 3 months of your salary.
Well, I don't know. I heard two, but maybe they updated it. I don't know. I'm not sure. That's interesting. That's kind of a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
And these marketing guys, they just invent all this stuff. It's some way where they make you feel lacking in some way. And then they're like, oh, but if you get this thing, then you'll be complete, you know?
You want to talk about, so I'm not a big person who believes in conspiracy theories, but I love conspiracy theories.
Me too. I love a good conspiracy theory. Yeah.
I mean, the whole diamond market and the De Beers company and all these people involved in the diamond
Yeah.
trade, there is a conspiracy theory. There's an area ripe for conspiracy theories.
Yeah. 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 And it's always formed some version of corruption, right?
Well, you've got the blood diamonds, right? And then you've got all, and then when scientists finally figured out how to make diamonds, because
Yeah.
the diamonds do have, other uses, industrial uses and the
Hmm.
like.
Hmm.
When they figured out how to make diamonds, then they said, okay, well now we've got to somehow distinguish
Yeah.
a laboratory made diamond from everything else, and so those are marked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, why would a diamond still have value when you can just make one? And in a normal world, it wouldn't.
It's just perception. It's just that's
What's
the
what's
narrative.
what's the provenance of a South African diamond that was made in by that was mined by De Beers,
Yeah. I don't know.
right? It's they've built a brand, they've built an
Yeah.
image, they've built an idea that they've been able to force down everyone's throat. Same thing happened here with rubies a while back. Rubies are used in a lot of lasers, and I remember, gosh, 15, 20 years ago, some scientists had developed a way to make flawless rubies of any
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
And one of the first things they had to do to avoid getting sued or maybe even killed, I don't know, maybe, was to start marking all their rubies with some kind of the equivalent of a watermark
Oh,
that
I got you. Yeah. Yeah, that's the essence of human nature. That's the essence of marketing and sales, trying to get people to buy crap they don't really need, but try to spin it in a way that they want to do that. And this is why logic and critical thinking is so important, actually. It's like whenever you're starting to feel really emotional about something, just take a pause and like think through this. Hang on, wait a minute. Like what's going on?
This is so one of the things that came up in Toastmasters today, someone was talking about they don't like they don't believe in regret,
Okay.
right? And basically because regret is a negative emotion, slows you down, and really everything's a lesson you can learn from and get better from.
Yeah.
And I was like, it got me thinking that emotion that does not make you better somehow
Yeah.
is not something you should be incorporating into your thinking. You experience it, I get it. It happens, you get a feeling. But unless you're going to somehow use that sadness, that regret, that depression, whatever it is, to motivate yourself
Yeah.
to act, then all it's going to do is drag you down.
Yeah.
So I would say as long as the emotion helps you move forward,
Yeah.
then it's okay to keep. But generally, I find it easier to remove the emotion, have the emotion, experience it, but when it comes to decision making and thinking and analyzing, take it out of the equation.
Well, not everybody can do that. It's interesting. My first thought was, is when that person said they don't like regret, I'm like, oh, that's something a psychopath would say, right? Because they don't link up harming others. They don't feel it. They're just like, yeah, whatever. It's just, I don't really have any effect. Doesn't affect me in any way.
No. This is the basis for a lot of science using information that was obtained through horrible means.
Yeah.
Like, the
Yeah.
old argument, like the Nazi experiments that they did on human bodies as they killed them.
Yeah.
If that information could be used to save lives, is it okay to use it?
Oh, yeah. Now you get into the whole train track thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, the scientific answer is of course, because you
Yeah.
remove all the emotion out of it, remove all the ethical arguments out of it, and you just make an analysis on the details. And yeah, of course, it would make sense.
Yeah.
Why not use this information that's out there?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and all I can say is, given different scenarios, people would make different decisions. Like the one person said, this is not logical. And yeah, okay, maybe I'll save one or two people, but the train's going to run away and kill like 1,000 people. So I'm going to just sacrifice the two people and I'll go for the 1,000 people. I mean, that sounds really logical and it sounds good until you're actually in the event. And then, you may not be able to do that, right?
Is
The
that
point of
okay to do after the fact, though? After the horrible thing has happened, and the person who did the horrible thing did so not with any desire to be helpful.
yeah,
Let's
right.
say they truly were evil and they did this evil thing.
Yeah, right.
But if the outcome of that evil was something that could be used for good or for greater good or for
Yeah,
benefit of mankind,
yeah,
right? The person was outright evil and wrong and a horrible person and deserved whatever punishment you can give them. But the information in and of itself is kind of agnostic.
oh my gosh. I'm having flashbacks of my first year in college, Mr. Ritchie, logic and critical thinking. That no matter what you'd say, it was the wrong answer.
Well, because you can argue either side of
I
this,
think you can
right?
argue it either way. Yeah.
If accepting that a million people were murdered, tortured, and murdered
Yeah.
allows you to save a billion people or a trillion people,
Yeah.
but then the argument is, oh well, someone else would have found that. Someone else could have done the research to get that. We didn't have to use this information,
Yeah.
and there's no way to know if that's true or not. If you don't use it, it may take you 10 years to do that, and you
Yeah.
got 10 years of losses,
Yeah.
or it might be immediate. There's no way to know.
There's no way to know. You just take the best guess you can.
It's
Yeah.
like the argument, if you could kill Hitler when he was a kid, would it be okay to kill him because he hadn't actually done those things yet when he was a kid?
Yeah. The general answer is typically no for that, but yeah, these are very difficult things. And it's like, no matter what, and this is what I have to be careful of, and I'd like other people to be careful of, and I'd like me to be more careful of this, is that no matter what your action is, it's possible to justify it to make it like the best possible answer.
So this is why I think one of the steps in critical thinking is to examine if there's another way to get to where to the information, the fact, the thing that's upsetting you, is there another way to get to that that doesn't go through the path that you've already assumed?
Yeah, yeah, I know I do
Right.
it all the time. So
I mean, you find out that the government made some stupid decision to spend money on something.
yeah.
Do you think that the person who made the decision is outright stupid? Or do you think that maybe there's a series of events that occurred that got you there, and each one could have been logical based upon the circumstances at that point?
Yeah, yeah. It depends on what you optimize for, right? I mean, you'll
Well,
get
we want to simplify. We want to say, oh, look at the stupid thing that happened. Obviously, the person's stupid who did it.
yeah, but that's marketing. I mean, that's what Fox News does. That's what MSNBC does. They just pull one thing, and then they come to this logical fallacy, like, oh, like okay, so for example, like if you're for what do they call it? For choice, right? For women, it's like, oh, everybody that's for choice obviously loves to kill babies, right?
Hmm. Yep.
I mean,
But this is the things, when you're not when two different sides have two different values or principles that they're arguing for,
yeah, right.
you can be 100% on this and 90% on this
Yeah,
principle. But when it comes to I've got to pick one or the other, I
you got to
can't
pick
pick
one or the
both.
other.
Then
Yeah,
I pick the one that, for whatever reason, has a slightly higher amount of value to me,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then you're being attacked on the other side when you're actually very closely aligned to that
yeah,
side,
yeah,
right? So whether you believe in individual rights or you believe in murdering baby humans, I mean, whichever one it is, which one is the individual's right to that freedom superseded by this or not? And you
uh-huh,
have to and then you're not judging. Your judgment call isn't which one of these is right. You're saying they're both right to some extent. Now your
yeah,
question is, which one is more right if I can only have one?
yeah. Right, 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 right. What's best for me typically, right? Which tribe do I want to be in? Which tribe is going to
Because
be the safe?
everything you decide for is a decision against something else.
Hmm. Yeah, and alternate to that, true, is everything you decide, are you saying no to, gives you the ability to say yes to something else.
This is the reason why we have so much dissidence today, is the idea that you didn't agree 100% with the one thing that I care about more than everything else.
Yeah, right.
Therefore, the fact that you and I are aligned 99% on everything else in the world
Yeah,
means you're my enemy.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And that is just the most idiotic, stupid thing I've ever heard. And yet that seems to be how the system is structured to reinforce today.
well, because it's easy to do that. You feel really good about yourself. You're one
It,
of
it
you're
drives
the
clicks.
righteous, right?
It drives clicks. Clicks drive money. So it's
Yeah,
all driven by the fact that I want your attention.
yeah,
Attention is harder to get than anything else. I
yes,
want your attention and I want you to click on these things. And when
yep,
you click on it, I'll make money.
yeah. So I'm gonna
And
like try to put the
somebody in that chain is making money.
yeah.
And having you be angry is a better way to get you to click on something.
Oh my gosh, of course. I mean that's the essence of both Fox and MSNBC and CNN. The general formula is this because it's they sell advertising. So you get your people riled up and then you sell them a bunch of advertising and then you sell them shit they don't need. So and that's the model.
Did you watch any of the interview with Elon Musk in the Oval Office this week?
I saw a little bit. I saw one part that I was cracking up. He was up there talking with his kid and his like kid was picking his nose. I thought that was pretty
I
entertaining.
like the fact that he brought his kid. I think it was a calculated move. It
Yeah,
was cool.
right.
Um, he is a really bad speaker.
Who, Musk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, of
He
course.
has the most incredible ideas, and he's I think he's right in the way he presents things most of the time. It's just he doesn't have he hasn't built a presence in the way he talks.
Yeah, right, right. He's not smooth and polished and everything. But I will tell you, in our current society, people may like that. Because I know we used to make videos a long time ago when we had our production studio. And what we found is that typically, if you overproduce a video, make it too slick, it doesn't perform as well as when it's just like shot on an iPhone. So we were shooting videos on iPhones like 15 years ago. And as long as the lighting is good, it doesn't have to be Hollywood, and the sound is good, doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as it's good it's not a distraction, those videos tended to do very well actually, as
Well,
opposed to
I think
slick
part of
photo.
it is he's built this image where he is the introverted expert on not expert, the introverted really smart guy
Yeah,
on
right.
things, right? Visionary.
Yeah.
And maybe this plays into that.
It
And
could have
that's
just
why
maybe
he's
how he
okay with it.
talks. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, his mind would be thinking about so many things. I don't know. I don't think most people care about that. They're more concerned about what he can do, you know?
No, so I mean, when I'm listening to him explain the fact that all these payment transactions were missing metadata that allows them to track it and figure out where it goes and what account it comes
Yeah.
out of and all that all the typical accounting things. Like in the old days when you would write in a checkbook every payment you made with checks. Right
Yeah,
now
right.
you go into your bank account and you can see every transaction
Yeah,
and
right.
there's data. Who's the vendor? How much was paid? What was the date? All that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Apparently, some of that data doesn't get captured by the U.S. government, and he's like, "You need to do this, otherwise, there's no way to audit you."
Yeah.
And that to me, being who I am in a process minded person, was like, that's it. That is the one thing that is the most important aspect of what he's saying is that they don't bother to track,
Yeah.
right? And yet, of course, that's not what everyone is going to hear. They're going to hear the $47,000 for this, $120,000 for that, $5 million for that, and that's what they hear. And I'm like, no, a one-line description of what this money was spent for
Yeah.
does not capture, and especially one written by someone who's trying to find problems, is not going to capture how that thing got approved. And so the question is, how much of the stuff that got approved was approved through a valid process where the process is screwed up by allowing it, and
Yeah.
how much of it was actually someone squeezing something through? Is this the piggy bank you use to buy off other governments? And
That
if that's
happens
the case,
all the time, actually.
yeah,
I
but
know
if
in
that's the
pizza,
case, then governments need a way to move money around easily to
covertly.
make things happen. Now the problem is that opens you up to all kinds of horrible
Oh, yeah.
criminal activity that could occur with that.
Yeah. 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 And if a human being, more than likely, can go astray, he almost certainly will go astray based
Well,
on his own best interests.
he was saying 100 to 200 billion is his estimate of how much foreign fraudulent rings are taking out of the U.S. economy,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
right? And given that that's less than that's not even a percent
Yeah.
of the budget, it would not surprise me if that's the case,
Yeah.
right? And then things like graft and kickbacks and stuff like that, they're part of any system,
They're
and a
part of
system
any
that doesn't
system.
have checks and balances to monitor is going
Yeah.
to have that more.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I used to catch. I was an auditor for years, and I would catch things that got through, and it was not nefarious. The people weren't trying to do things. It was not fraud. It was just a mistake.
Yeah.
My process is this happens, that person reviews it, that person signs off on it, that person checks it, blah blah blah, and there's processes for each of those people
Yeah.
to follow.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is what a company does because they're responsible for their money. The government doesn't seem to have that person who can impose that on the process.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you. So when I used to sell, right, I used to group clients up into two major groups. One, it was a small business owner, and that could be up to 10 million revenue. But the difference was it was his money. It was his personal money, right?
Yep.
Versus selling into corporations where they just manage it. It's not their money. Very different sales process. And until I learned that, I was kind of, only half effective. Because I was thinking always in terms of since it was my company, it was my money, I assume that's how they're going to think. But the corporate guy doesn't think that way.
Oh no, I had a guy. So I think I mentioned to you when I was doing when I was IT director of a small company. I also handled facilities. I did the furniture. I did the office supplies, and I would order stuff for the company.
Yeah.
And, and I would order from where I could get a good deal on,
Yeah. Right.
right? And I would do it through credit cards, company credit cards, which the accounting department didn't like because they didn't have a process or procedure. They wanted
Right.
me to always order from the same place, and I said
Of
I can do
course.
that,
Of
but
course.
what you're going to have is higher costs. You're
Yeah.
going to raise your costs by probably 20%
And then we
of
don't care. We don't care.
and they're like they don't care because they just want control of it. But
Right.
what really reinforced this, and I haven't told you this, is I had a guy from a local office supply company call me up and ask me if he wanted to take me out to lunch, and try to
Of
get me
course.
to buy from him. In the course of that lunch, I've only met this guy for an hour. I think we went to In-N-Out Burger. He basically told me if we order from him, I would get a kickback.
Yeah. Right. Of course. Yeah.
And I honestly, I'd never been exposed to that before. And maybe I was a little naive to think about it, but I was shocked. I didn't say anything. I was like, oh, well, thank you very much. And at the end of the day, I was like, we didn't do business with him because if you're willing to do that, I can't trust you.
Well,
That's
we don't call typically it's not called kickbacks. It's called, oh, we'll put you on an affiliate program or you'll be on a commission program but it's
Oh
all
no, he wasn't that savvy.
wasn't that nuanced. Yeah. He's like, listen, dude, I'm going to kick a little back to you here.
And since I couldn't believe this is what was being offered, I actually walked through a scenario. So if I did this and blah blah blah, yeah, and basically, but no, his kickback was you wouldn't get. No. So maybe let me go further. His kickback was we wouldn't get everything we ordered.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right? So I would order 10 desk chairs and get
Yeah.
9,
Yeah.
and then we'd split the money that the company paid for the 10th chair.
Nice. Nice. Perfect. Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'd known this guy for an hour. We'd been eating this hamburger, and I'm like, oh. So I took the hamburger lunch. I got that, but I mean,
Yeah. Well, this is just how kind of business is done. It's just there's a lot of corruption. And so this leads me to another point. I've been thinking about this a lot, Chris. And
mhm.
that I think our problem is this. I think I've figured this out. And I'm why am I not saying it? Because I'm not sure about it. But I think, okay, hang on. Let me just get to the point. Let me just say, I believe that on a spectrum of humans, like a good person human to a not so good human, it's how selfish they are. I think it's one sliding scale. I think if you go back through history and look at the best people and the worst people, it's who was selfish and who wasn't selfish. I think that's like the one slider that I would like to slide more to the generous portion as opposed to the selfish portion.
So let me ask you this
Yeah.
to drill down into that a moment. Selfish versus self-centered.
Oh yeah, I'm not that nuanced yet.
And the way I nuance this is selfish to me is someone who thinks only of themselves and doesn't care about the impact to others
okay.
versus someone who's self-centered who thinks only of themselves and isn't aware of the impact to others.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
think I
interesting.
think a lot of people are self-centered.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you were to call them out on it somehow through society, peer pressure, parents, family, whatever, they would pull back to being more considerate of other people.
Could be. Maybe they're not aware. Yeah, I mean, there's no question that's part of it. Could it be a combination of both?
In fact, so next week's Toastmasters meeting topic is being considerate.
Oh, I like that.
And so this is one I think I recommended.
Yeah,
And it's something that crosses my mind. I think we've even talked about it. When you're driving on a freeway and some guy goes from the fast lane to get off in front of you,
yeah,
he
right.
sees at the last minute that the exit's right here.
Yeah,
And he cuts across 4 lanes of traffic
yeah,
dangerously
yeah,
to make the off ramp.
yeah,
To me, that's an inconsiderate asshole.
yeah, yeah. He's dangerous.
You've put me in danger
Yeah,
because you weren't paying attention.
right.
The smart thing to do, move over slowly, get over. You're going to miss the exit. Get off the next exit and come back.
Well, for them, the thought of missing the exit is intolerable.
Yeah. So you've basically put me at more risk because you weren't paying attention.
Correct.
And to me, that is the most self-centered aspect of all. It
Yeah,
could also be selfish because you may not care that you've put me in danger, but it's
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
selfish.
Could be unaware. I haven't nuanced it out, but it still has the same effect, right? It doesn't really matter what the internal thought is.
Yeah, but we live in a world where we care about people's motivations.
Well, and intention is important. I mean, there's no doubt, but I would still lump both of those into the bad section, you know.
Yeah, I just think in the realm of bad, everything's the bad side. There are more bad than less
Yeah.
bad.
And then you lump them into, okay, so you're no doubt you're a jerk for doing that and you're unsafe. And I don't know what your intention is, but either you're an idiot or an asshole, one of the two. I'm just not sure which one, right?
Well, so and then we start getting into how knowledgeable, how wise, how intelligent are these people, because that actually makes the modifier bigger. If you know that crossing all those lanes of traffic is potentially dangerous to everyone else, and
Yeah,
you still do it, then you are on the asshole side.
yeah.
If you don't know that, or it doesn't occur to you, or that it doesn't even cross your mind, that's a different thing.
That's
So
a different thing.
people who know they're hurting people are bad. People who know how much they're hurting people are even worse.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it matters. The intent matters, right?
But intent matters, but then the level of intent, I
Yeah.
think, can be judged by how much you know of a situation.
Well, and that's our court system does that. So let's say if somebody does something, let's say maybe somebody steals something because they have hungry kids in their car, right? It's like, yeah, that's not good what you did, but we can sort of we'll go easy on the punishment. Just don't do that again, right? And oh, by the way, there's resources that can help you if that happens again. You don't have to steal, right? So that's treated um much with a little more, what do you call it? Grace,
Leniency. Leniency.
leniency than if somebody is just totally selfish and doing it just for them.
But we know that ignorance of the law is not an excuse,
Not an
right?
excuse.
Just
Yeah.
because you didn't know there was a law on something.
Yeah.
So we're basically saying the outcome, the action, is
Yeah.
what you're guilty of, no matter what.
Well, that's how the law can do, right? I mean that's
No. And this is where I have a problem with hate crime.
oh, interesting. Okay.
Why does someone who kills someone because they don't like their race, their sex, their religion, why is that worse than the person who kills them because they just don't like them? They're dead in both situations. You committed murder in either situation, and yet we seem to view the fact that if there was hate behind it, if there was racial or sexual hate or whatever behind it, that is somehow worse. And so we try to give bigger penalties.
Yeah,
This is
I mean
one thing where intent actually colors the the way we treat the action.
that sounds reasonable to me.
Why
Because
does that matter? If you
well,
kill someone, you kill
in
someone. You
both
beat someone up,
cases
you
the
beat someone up.
person's dead, right? But that's why
Mhm.
we have first degree, second degree, third degree murder, we have crimes of passion. There's all these different things. So is it that you were just having a really bad day and under a lot of stress, and normally you wouldn't do this, and there was just some freak event that happened? It's like, okay, maybe we can give a little bit of grace to that scenario, right? We don't excuse your action, but we give you a little grace, as opposed to the person that this was just their intent, right? They got pleasure out of this. That person is like we consider evil and they need to be punished more
Okay,
severely.
so take it back. Let's go to vandalism. Let's say the crime is vandalism.
Yeah, exactly.
So you vandalize a person's house because they did something that triggered you,
Yeah.
or you don't like some aspect of their character, right?
So,
Their race, their religion, their whatever, and you therefore vandalize their house because of that.
mhm. How bad did you, are we talking about this is like high school toilet papering your tree in front of your house, or is talking breaking windows out? I
You
mean,
slash their tires. I don't know
oh,
what it
that's
is,
more serious than that.
but let's
That's
make it identical in either situation.
okay.
In both of them, they resulted in slash tires.
Okay. Okay.
Then my question to you is, why is there a distinction in the punishment here?
Because the intent is different.
Mm.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to me it's the easiest, simplest thing in the world.
That's the most unscientific answer you could give. Science should be the same result
Yeah, but we
based
don't
upon
base
the
our
outcome.
society on science. We base it on emotion and with a little bit of science thrown in when we need it. So this is why. Let me go back to the church kind of thing.
Mhm.
So this is sort of so this is back to the laws of Moses, right? That God wanted people to behave in a certain way. We need a certain kind of behavior that's going to be good for society. And that's going to be generally good for most people in society. So he made a bunch of rules and a bunch of laws. But
Yep.
those rules and the laws, hang on, I need to clarify this, but I'm going to take a stab at it. The rules and the laws were just to expose the corrupted heart, right? Just the evilness inside of you, actually. So they had to be even. That is, so if you do this, you're correct. But nowhere did we really have the intention of it. Now that's done in the court system. The intention is taken into consideration. But I think what you're saying is, look, if the law says you steal, you get this. If you do this, you get this. Whether the intention is or not, you think the punishment should be identical. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying the damage you did,
The damage, the harm.
harm you did, is
Yeah.
the same regardless of why you did it.
The harm
And,
is exactly the same,
right.
right? But it's like the why you
And
did
unless you can show it was accidental or due to some overriding principle like self-defense or some other aspect,
yeah.
then to me the outcome was based upon you did this bad thing and the outcome was this. Why you did the bad thing is somewhat is basically less relevant. You can argue you were forced to, someone's blackmailing you. I don't know. Now we're getting into weird, nuanced edge cases.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, a criminal who holds you up because take your money versus one who targets you because you're a particular race or religion and takes your money is still taking your money.
Yeah, it's still taking your money. I think in case the second case, and I can't, I'm torn because I can't build a logical argument for it. To me, it just seems like the most natural thing in the world. And why are we even talking about this is what I'm thinking right now, because it's
So
so
you're judging intent.
I'm judging intent. Yeah, intent's very
So
important.
how do you judge intent fairly across every situation? How do you judge intent without letting your emotion get into play? If you just judge the outcome, you can do that without and come up with a consistent metric that you're using to measure this.
Well,
As soon as you judge an intent, someone has to judge the intent. Was it a good intent? Was it bad? Was it mostly an okay intent with a little bit of badness in it? As soon as you start doing that, everything becomes subjective. And I want things to be as objective as I can make them.
yeah. Good luck with that one, actually. That is challenging. Let me just throw something out there. Maybe
Mhm.
this will make sense. So let's take some of the worst crimes that we could possibly imagine is when people harm children, especially sexual harm, right? And
Yep.
we freaking lose our shit at that,
Mhm.
right? I mean, they're just because it's so unfair, right? Like a 30-year-old man molested a 2-year-old child. It's like there's a special place in hell for you. There's
There is, isn't there?
I'm not sure.
Which level of hell is
I don't know. I don't know much about the levels of hell, to be honest with you. But I'm sure in my mind, hopefully, God made a special place because you are just evil, right? Okay. And so then I start thinking about other things, right? There's no doubt that person has to be responsible. But then I want to know what happened to that person and how did they get that? Maybe they were molested as a child. Maybe there's a lot of really crappy stuff that happened to them that I'm not justifying the action, but I'm like, I can at least understand how this person got there. And now I have to punish them, but I don't consider it punishment. See, in this case, I don't want to punish them for the sake of punishing them. I want to take them out of society, either kill them or lock them up forever, just because even if they've been damaged and even if it's not their fault, right? They're still just too dangerous to have running around in society. So they need to be removed. They're just too dangerous. But there's no real element of punishment in my mind for that.
So I guess the question then becomes, what is the purpose of punishment?
Well, it's to change behavior is the idea, right?
Not
At
everyone
the
agrees with
lower
that,
end,
right? I mean, it's like, why have the death penalty? Comes to like getting people out
because
of the gene pool versus, to me, it's like, what is the intent of punishing someone for committing a crime?
well, it's for that person not to commit again, but it's also for other people to see that and say, "Oh, wait a minute. If I go do this, I'll get the death penalty, so I think I'm going to change my behavior." And I don't know how well that works, but I'm sure it works to some extent.
So if I see that someone got less of a penalty because their intent was different, does
Yeah.
that
Well, I think you're breaking up, Chris. We'll give you a second. Hey, you're back, Chris. You were gone there for a few seconds.
Yeah, I did froze for a second. No, I was asking, did you get my question?
No, go ahead, repeat it. No, I did not.
Okay, so if I see someone get less punishment because their intent was judged to be not as bad as someone else's,
Not as bad, not as evil. Right,
does that
exactly.
mean that I can justify taking similar actions if my intent is also not as bad?
Well, sure, you can justify it. You can justify anything, but whether everybody else can justify it or not, that's the question.
But then can I go to court and expect that they're going to take the same stance?
Well, it depends on who your attorney is, and it depends on who the judge is.
Yes, but there's one of the things about laws is there's an expectation that behavior and outcomes are relatively consistent. There's going to be
Yeah,
outliers always.
that's
But
absolutely not true, actually.
no, 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 no. This if you can't be relatively confident in what an outcome of a law of a court case is, relatively. I'm not saying always.
Yeah.
Then it's the same as not having the law. So basically, the purpose of a code of laws is to have the expected behavior, the
Yeah.
punishment for the behavior listed, and people to understand what's expected of them.
Yeah.
People will push the limits, people will argue, people will find the loopholes. They'll do all of that on the fringes of the system. But the system as a whole has to be designed to give you a relatively good chance of understanding what the outcome is going to be. If
Well,
someone steals your identity, or someone steals your brand, or someone damages you, and you take them to court, you have to have a fair understanding of the belief in the idea that you're going to win that.
I think that's a good thought to have. That in no way, no form, no case is true in any way in our current court system. It depends on who the judge is and who the attorney is and how much money you have and what kind of shenanigans they want to play. So, for instance, I
Well,
bet this one guy.
but why is it the money, by the way? So
Well,
I
the
agree
money,
with you.
it always comes down to
Why
money
is the money?
power. Always comes down to money power. So
But
let me.
to me, the money comes from resources. The more money you have, the more and better resources you can get, and the more chance that because the body of law is so massive, they'll be able to find some way to get you out of the problem.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you can do things, and you can force the other. You can.
I'm trying to follow the logical conclusion of why money is powerful. It's not that they're rich, that they're buying people off. It's they're rich and they're buying the loopholes. They're buying their way through to get around the laws that are already baked into our legal system.
Yeah, and probably some influence and all sorts of stuff or whatever, right? So.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's just the way our system works. I mean, I've talked to many attorneys, and I used to talk to a few attorneys, and they will tell you that the outcome's not guaranteed. It depends on who the jury is, depends on how good the attorney is, and it depends on the judge. And it depends on whether the judge had a fight with his wife that morning.
And I would argue that you're talking about a small percentage of the entire court system as a whole. You go to small
Oh,
claims court, you go to all you take the entire court system across the country and look at it, and the stuff you're seeing, the stuff that is questionable, the stuff that gets this way, is the fringe. Most of the stuff is being handled by like clockwork the way it's supposed to. When you go to traffic court, you've got rules on how that goes. Every single aspect of our laws, the bulk of it is done, and the expectation is pretty much known how it's going to come out.
oh, I don't know. I'll do some research on that. I would think it's way above 50%, actually.
I would say you're probably 5-10%.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go if you're doing 5 or 10, I'm gonna do like at least 75% then.
Yeah.
Actually, because I'll tell you, every time I hear a case, the question always comes up, who's the judge? Who's the judge? Who's the judge? Right? What's the judge gonna say? And
So when you got cases that where you're asking who the judge is, that means that case has money and attention, and money and attention changes dynamics.
always, yeah. There's
Right?
always somebody
The
in there.
bulk of court cases in the United States are not done by known judges. They're not done by big lawyers. The people aren't spending millions of dollars on legal teams to
Yeah, right.
defend themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think so. I'll check it out. Hang on, I'm gonna make a note of that. I think it's way above 50, and you're saying it's less than 50.
I'm saying if it were above 50, we would be even more angry at our legal system, and we would have less trust, even less trust than we have today.
Well, dude, we have hardly no trust in our legal system, no trust in Congress. I mean, Congress is at an all-time low. So
Congress isn't the legal system.
no,
Congress is not the legal system.
I understand. I understand. Um,
Oh,
right?
so I was driving. I picked up my daughter from school, which is why we started the call late. And we were
Yeah.
driving back, and there were all these protesters in one of the corners, and they were all holding up anti-Elon Musk, anti-Trump signs. And one person had a sign that said, no one voted for Elon."
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, so I was talking to my daughter. What do you think are the assumptions that go into that comment right
Many
there?
assumptions. Yeah.
Right? And so I asked her, what does that mean? They're saying somehow that he's acting or being or is president, right? And somehow the things that he's doing fall under presidential powers,
Yeah, right.
and therefore, since he wasn't elected, that's not right.
Yeah, because they don't like it.
So I started talking to my daughter. So aside from the politicians that get elected, who's in politics? And so I
Yeah.
started like the secretary of this, secretary of that, all those people who have roles who they're confirmed. I said the whole Supreme Court is not elected,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So there's
Appointed.
huge parts of our government that have power that are not elected.
Yes, right, exactly.
And anyone who's chosen by the president and is approved, and I guess that would be the argument you would make if you want to talk about Elon Musk, is the fact that he was not confirmed by the Senate for anything.
Right,
That
right.
would be an argument you might be able to make in my mind, because
Yeah,
his role is totally outside of any department,
yeah, yeah,
right? So that I could see as an argument, but of course that isn't what sells. There's too much nuance on that, so they just say no one voted for it. But
yeah,
all the assumptions that go in there, that to make me agree with you, I've got to have the same assumptions you've got.
yeah.
And so I was trying to explain to her, this is what happens when you simplify down to a saying, is if you're not aligned on your thinking, you're just totally in a different place.
You're in a totally different place. Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. Well, and it's like, now the latest buzzword is because, in marketing, you got to label things, which we need to talk about that at some point. Labeling things, I think, is really important because if you
You
don't,
mentioned that on one of our previous podcasts too.
yeah, I'm going to write that down. We got to label. Got to label things to understand them, and then you can fully sort of flesh out what they do and can't do, actually. Got to put a label on them.
And then I guess to me, can you take the power of labeling things yourself for yourself?
Oh, yes. In fact, that's what you want to do. So, one of the cool things about what Trump did early on is he labeled his opponents before they labeled him. This is a game, the first one there wins, basically, right? Because now, instead of attacking, they're constantly defending against it, Crooked Hillary. No, I'm not crooked. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. Well, she's already Trump's his beater, right? Because he's beat her the punch.
You, when someone does that, the only thing you could do is accept it, and then make fun of it and somehow
Yeah,
disprove it
yeah,
by accepting it. When you
yeah,
fight it, well, you fight it because it's true, or you fight it because it's false.
yeah, yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
matter,
Well, it fights
right?
it because it bugs you, and you're like, "That's
But
not me.
you
That's
you
not."
you've gotta accept it and use it.
Mhm.
I think I told you, one woman who used to work for me, her her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was a part of that group, and she would always insult her and annoy her and all that kind of stuff. And I said, the next time she insults you, just
Yeah,
say thank you.
yeah,
Just say thank you.
yeah,
And she said it worked. That the woman who was insulting her got upset because she wasn't getting riled up.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it takes all their power away. It takes the fun away from the game. Right. So there was this guy when I was taking one of these gun classes. He was in the military, and he's like, "Listen, the worst thing you could do in the military is because people are just constantly trying to shred everybody. It's just the game, right?"
Yeah.
And he said, "The moment that you let on that something bugs you, you are toast for your next 5 years. They're gonna just
Well,
bombard you with that.
I could see, like, when he called Hillary Cricket Hillary,
Yeah,
I could see the next time she's in the public eye, if she were to do some stupid little dance or something as she said it. Oh, I'm
yeah,
Cricket Hillary, or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah,
just to
yeah,
kind of show that I don't care what you call me,
yeah, 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 yeah,
right? That would have probably caught on. It would have been seen everywhere. They would have it would have made the rounds, and
yeah.
you would have belittled his belittling of you.
Yeah, but she had so much ego. She just got sucked. She didn't know jujitsu, man, and
Ego, ego's gonna ego gets in the way.
he just owned her.
You need to have a reasonable, realistic understanding of what you can and can't do.
Maybe I don't know. You could probably always do more than you think you can do.
But you need to have a realistic, and then you make your judgment call based upon that,
Yeah, well, I think
right? And
yeah,
you can push
yeah,
yourself. To me, being realistic means I'm pretty smart, but I know there's people smarter than me.
yeah,
But I means I'm also, there's a good chance everyone I meet is going to not be as smart as me.
yeah,
But what does that mean? How do I act in that situation? Do I act like a jerk? Do I act like a whatever, right? Or I'm very strong, or I'm very fast, or I'm very whatever. I don't care what the topic
yeah,
is, right? I think you need to be aware of that. So when someone makes fun of you and it's upsetting you, you go, you know what? I can either respond
yeah,
in a against that, or I can respond in a I don't give a damn.
yeah,
Which one do
yeah.
you think the people who are watching are gonna be more
Oh,
in?
it depends on it's like Jordan Peterson's really good at that sort of stuff because there's already people trying to constantly own him and whatever, and
Well,
he's
he
just
just brings them back to
he
whatever.
just come
Like,
out.
he says, "Wait a moment. Instead of belittling me, why don't you try to explain it to me?"
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Um, because as we know, if you can't explain it to someone else, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, you can totally slam them. You're obviously you're getting emotional and you can't think anymore, right? So You need to
I
slow
was
down.
watching. I was watching. What Weinstein? Is that the guy's name?
I
Eric
don't know.
Weinstein.
I don't know all the
Anyway,
people.
he's on
I
YouTube
don't
a lot.
watch a lot of politics anymore. I kind of go in
And,
phases.
well, he's I don't know what his background is, science, politics, whatever, because he's always on the science stuff, but
Yeah.
he's gotten kind of political. And they were talking about the whole Elon Musk thing, and one of the other conservative people on there was kept interrupting him, and he said, "Let me finish my point. Let me finish." It's the
Yeah.
same thing. People in these arguments never let the other person finish their thought so
No,
that
right.
you can actually have a conversation. The whole point is to shut down their thought before it comes out of their mouth. And
Yes.
that to me is so disingenuous. Like, if you want to have a conversation, shut your mouth, listen, and respond. If you don't want to have a conversation, keep spouting.
Well, yeah, and I will tell you the attacking thing works, right? You can overwhelm. This is the jujitsu concept, right? Is that first of all, you move from position to position. You never try to submit before you're in the right position. Because the problem is if they know what they're doing, you you're in bad shape, right? Because you don't have the advantage. But what you can do in jujitsu, and if you want to beat even a higher belt, is you've got to apply just more. We call it pressure. You got to just put constant pressure, pressure, pushing, 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 taking as many cheap shots as you can, really cheap shots, to get them to freak out and get emotional, and then they make a mistake, and now I move into my position actually. So this is all part of the strategy in jujitsu. And so I don't know that most people are well trained in doing that. This is why we should probably start some sort of course or practice ourselves where we just are constantly sparring at each other, and attacking each other. And we set rules up. We say, okay, we're going to limit the attack. You're not allowed to talk about my mom or something like that. So
I remember
there are
one of
some
my old
rules.
bosses, her daughter was in high school and single child, right? And one of the things the family did at one point was they would sit around the table and try to insult her to get her used because she didn't have
Yes,
siblings,
yes,
and she was going to a new school, and they wanted to get her used to this idea that
yeah,
people will make fun of you.
yeah,
So one of the things they did was a couple times a week they'd sit around the table and after dinner or whatever and try insults at
yeah,
her
yeah,
to make
yeah,
sure she didn't get emotional about it.
yeah, right, exactly. And that is what jujitsu, man, we gotta, I don't know that there's any other place that they do training like jujitsu, which is just constant pressure, constant pressure. And after a while, you think you're freaking out, but after you have three or 500 or 1,000 insults, you're just like, what? I didn't even, what? You
Well,
just
this
start
is
laughing at it because it has no effect on you anymore.
so this is why when you compare environments, you got this problem, right?
Yeah,
In the locker room of a sports team, at least for guys, I'm assuming there's some carryover to the girls' side, but the guys insult each other all the time.
all the time. Yeah.
And there's some things you generally don't insult unless you know it gets under their skin.
Yeah,
Like
there,
that's a
there's
different,
there's there's
different thing.
certain rules of
Yeah.
yeah, right.
But the point is, there's vulgar language, there's
Yeah.
attacks on manhood, there's all kinds of
Oh, of
stuff.
course, yeah.
And the expectation is every man in there, every person in there, has enough ego and self worth and self awareness to be able to put up a bit and give back a bit.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah.
Right? And yes, some of them are better than others, but at the end of the day, there's this expectation, and that's why when you see that locker room behavior outside the locker room, and
Yeah.
people don't understand the constraints that are in the locker room for
Yeah.
that, you end up with people getting offended and upset and all that. So when you hear a recording from someone from that locker room, and you hear someone said something, oh my God, they said this horrible thing, and it's like, yeah, they were in the locker room.
Yeah, I know. I know
They were
people.
in a different world. They were not in the world outside that locker room, which does have different rules and different
Yeah,
constraints.
different, and these are preset rules, and there's definitely you don't want to go beyond something. Like just like jujitsu. So if we could take jujitsu like rules for sparring, and then we kind of go after each other,
So
you get
maybe we need to pick
used
a
to it.
specific type of attack.
Yeah, yeah, right. We talked about this. We need to go over all the standard logical attacks, which I'm not that familiar with. I don't know their names, but I'm familiar when I see them. The ad hominem attack, or you're attacking them. If you can't beat the person logically, attack them personally.
Yes,
You-
which seems to be the go-to anymore. People go right to that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that is very effective, super effective until you're trained in how to use it and how to defend against it. Then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore, you know?
I'm looking up right now because I do have Schopenhauer's book, Arthur Schopenhauer wrote the Art of Controversy and the Art of Being Right.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right.
And in all of these, he went in and explained, the different ways of arguing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what happened was he talks about the ad hominem attack and
Yeah.
others. So there's a whole bunch of aspects in here. The extension, exaggerate your opponent's proposition. So taking it
Yeah.
to absurdity, the absurd conclusion, right? Oh, you want to do this and this and this and this, right? The
Yeah.
ho- homonymy,
Ad hominem or something. Yeah.
homonym-
I don't know. Yeah.
uh, use words with multiple meanings to extend your proposition.
Yeah.
So you can I guess that makes kind of makes fun of generalize specific statements that the
Yeah.
opponent makes, right?
Yeah.
Conceal your game, use false propositions. So I think you could say, yeah, well, then this is going to happen, that's going to happen, then we're going to end up in a world where cats are ruling the world or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, postulate what has to be proved. Yield admissions through. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Make your opponent angry. That's one of them in here. Make your opponent.
Yeah.
angry.
You get them out of control, right? I mean, yeah, that's a jujitsu technique, actually. You get them so riled up and you let them burn out. Maybe people have got 30 seconds, 45 seconds of energy in them and they run out of power and then they're done. They just messed up.
This is one I've seen, and you don't even notice it. It says, take advantage of the naysayer. If your opponent always denies your questions,
Yeah.
ask the opposite of your question to get them to have to say yes.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Right. So you change it from a positive to a negative wording. I mean, that's like Chris Voss's, let them say no.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Give them some power. Yeah.
Because they're comfortable saying no. So ask them a question where no is the answer you want.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think this is good because something I'd like to do, and maybe we can sort of think about wrapping up because it's Valentine's Day and I want to go eat something. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to maybe take the top 5 of these, the most common ones, and then you and I can like train ourselves, and then maybe we can break out separate videos training other people, and then we start to spar against each other. But the sparring here is not full on attacks. It's maybe at 10% or 20%, where we're just basically what we're doing, we're just hitting the ball across the net, and we're not trying to win. We're just trying to keep the ball in play as long as possible. And because what you got to do, you got to
topic. Do we need to pick a topic to
it could be a topic
around?
or something. Yeah, it's not so important. Other than I'm just going to try to prove you wrong, or we'll each have an objective actually, and the objectives will get harder and harder and more intense as time.
So it's almost like we're going to debate, but we don't care about the debate. We care about the
We just care about the techniques. Yes, right. We're training, like in jujitsu. There's something called where you're training with your partner, right? You're not trying to beat your partner. You're actually trying to help him because you need to make sure that you have the essence structure of this technique. Like if you're doing an arm bar, or you're doing this, you're saying, okay, I got to go here and I got to go there and I got to go to this step. And you just work through the steps where you kind of memorize them. Then what you do is you go to sparring, where now it's like, I'm not going to just sit there and do nothing. In fact, there might be cases in the learning process where you're helping. You're like, no, wait a minute, don't do that. Do this instead, because you went to step 1, 2, 3, and then you went to 5. You missed step 4.
If you just pushed me a little bit to the side here, it would have had more of an impact. And you're actually correct.
It's a very cooperative environment. And then you go into sparring and you specify, well, how intense do we want to do this? Well, we want to go at like 20% power. I'm not going to do everything I can to stop you on this attack, but what I'm going to do is I'm not just going to roll over either. So you're going to actually have to work for it a little bit.
So I think to make that work,
yeah,
knowing what 20% power is or 30% power when it comes to a debate attack or an argument attack is going to be tough.
We got to calibrate that, yeah.
And it's also going to be very depending on how sensitive you are on a topic versus how I am.
Right.
So I think we need feedback. Like, okay, that was a zinger, that was 100%, or that was 70%, whatever, right?
So like
if we wanted to talk about health and I wanted to attack something about your health, oh, you've been sick a long time, man. What's going on? That sort of thing. Right. Is that a 10% or a 50% depending on how you're feeling, right?
Well, I don't know. We just go through and we just see. But there's.
I'm not saying I do. I'm saying I think we need that feedback so we can learn what a 10% attack is like versus a 100% attack.
So we calibrate. Yeah, we calibrate.
Yeah, because I think we can use that when we meet other people and argue with them.
Yes, exactly.
right?
Right.
So when
Exactly.
you're arguing with someone who's still a child, let's say, you're going to have one way of arguing and one level of arguing than if you're arguing with a professor.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like in jujitsu. So basically, the master, regardless of the belt level, it doesn't matter. In his mind, he's like a white belt, black belt. You guys are the same. I mean, you're so easy to. It's not even even my black belts. I can just smoke them in 3 seconds. They have no idea what they're dealing with, right? And it's funny because when you think of a black belt, you think it's such a high level, but he's like, white belt, black belt, same thing. You're both dead in 3 seconds. There's nothing there's nothing that either of you can do to stop my attack.
It might be worthwhile some point for us to talk about what mastery is.
Hmm. I think that's good.
Is a
So that's
black belt a
interesting.
master, or is a black belt just a rank?
No, typically a black belt is considered that you've mastered your fundamentals. That's the only difference between a white belt and a black belt. Most people will say is like the black belt has mastered his fundamentals that can execute them in pretty good shape most of the time. But the master is a different level. The master is a
So,
freak of
so
nature, right?
quantifying or explaining the threshold where someone moves from one to the other. And I don't think it's an objective, it's these boxes you tick off. But there's like a spectrum of, when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to experience, when it comes to, all these different categorizations, there's a threshold where someone is now a master. And your idea of a master may not match 100% with my
No,
idea
it
of a
may not match. It's like, but usually those people will self-identify. I mean, everybody will tend to agree,
how.
right?
So we should talk about that. How can a
Because they've
self,
had so many experiences.
but how are we perceiving that? And then
Oh,
how are they projecting that? And then the other question becomes, how can we learn to project that? And is it something we can fake, or is it something that has to come from somewhere else? I
I
think those are all things to explore.
I think you can. It depends on the level of the person that you're rolling around with, how much experience they have actually. So, like when you're dealing with a master, I mean, it's clear, but he never shows his power. He never shows it. But it's like he's just so gentle with you and just, but it's like no matter what you do, he doesn't ever hurt you. But he's just like, he'll have one pinky on your pant leg and he'll just be pulling your leg over and you just can't move, you know? And at first you become so frustrated and you're like, oh, and then you finally realize you're like, oh my God, this guy could murder me in 3 seconds if he wanted to, actually. But
Well,
he's
have
just
you
gentle.
have you heard the term, uh, pardon my French here, big dick energy?
Oh yeah, of course. It's like, yeah, it's like come.
So going down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out self-awareness and critical thinking, all I said, what are the characteristics of big dick energy? And I
Well,
asked ChatGPT, and it came up with confidence, charisma. I came up with all these things, and I'm like, so could you put together a learning plan to develop those skills?
yeah, I prefer not to call it big dick energy because to me
No,
it's
we need another name because it has nothing to do with being a man or anything like that.
yeah,
And actually, when you look at the individual characteristics, it has nothing to do with that.
yeah,
It's all about other aspects. I wonder if I'm applying the same logic here to being a master of something.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, being a master is way beyond big dick energy, right? I mean,
I don't know because I think it's somewhat a mastery of yourself, right?
well,
Because you're talking about mastery of a particular area of knowledge, and that comes with that knowledge, but it also comes with mastering other aspects of yourself, particularly when you're talking about something like jujitsu, where there's a mentality that goes with it, right?
yeah,
Some stuff, some I would say like okay, let's talk about another topic you like is shooting, right?
yeah,
Like I mean like competitive shooting, right? Those guys aren't just they're physically who knows what they look like,
yeah,
but
right.
there's a mental state they go into when they're able to do that they've mastered that goes along with the physical skill of pulling a trigger.
Yeah, and that is true, but and they may be awesome shooters, right? But here's the thing, they may be technically way better than some other guy, but the problem is their targets don't shoot back. And all of a sudden, when your target starts shooting back, that's
So,
a
you're talking about something totally. You're talking about combat. I wasn't talking about combat.
yeah, but it's different though, because what they'll do is they may look like they're really badass because they move so quickly, actually. But they've never had negative consequences of moving too fast. And so they can be easily murdered, basically, with somebody that has those skills.
So why does mastery have to include murder?
It's just a form of power. It just means that you can do things better than pretty much
So
anybody else.
let me articulate what I think your underlying thing in there. There needs to be enough of a threat to you that you grow. So
Well, maybe.
someone who gets really good at target shooting, let's say, I don't know what challenges come in the way and how hard their life is to build that skill set.
Well, I would say I don't want threat. I'd rather use a generic term called pressure. How much pressure is being put on them, right? And so one pressure is speed. Everything's by the clock, right? You've got to go through and shoot these targets. You only get 22 seconds to do it or whatever. The fastest guy wins. That's a form of pressure. But what you want to do though, Chris, is you want to put the identical pressure when you train versus what's going to be expected when you actually fight for real.
Pressure. I'm trying to get. I see connections in what you're saying. I'm trying to figure out if it aligns. I like hardship, whatever that means to you.
Well, you could call it anything. I mean, I guess, we could be on the mat. We're too far apart, and let's roll around
Pain,
to the.
suffering, all those things.
You would understand pressure because you would be like, okay, now I understand. Because I would show you what pressure is, actually. That makes sense. And you would physically feel
But
pressure.
to use that term as the goad that's pushing someone to grow.
Yeah. It's pressure. I mean, literally, it's physical pressure. It's like pressure that I'm intentionally putting weight on your hips because I know how you're going to move and you got to move hips. So I'm going to be blocking certain
How
hip.
do I translate to something else? Because what I'm extrapolating from all this is that you keep going back to jujitsu because it challenges you and you grow,
Yeah, you challenge as you grow. Yeah, exactly.
right? So you're arguing pressure, but to me, that not every challenge in the world is going to be a pressure challenge, and so I don't want to call the term pressure for everything that challenges you to grow.
Oh, I think it applies to everything perfectly, actually. Because
So
it's
why when I plant seeds in the ground, some of them grow and some of them don't,
well, I've done it.
right?
Yeah, that's
They're
that's
in the same conditions, you know. There's water, and I'm like, some of them may try to be growing under a rock or a particular hard thing.
yeah, right.
Is that pressure that's keeping that from happening? And it is growing. It is overcoming things again that are working against it.
Well, let me redefine pressure then. I'm saying when you get into a conflict with another human being, right? Whether it's physical fighting, whether you're in a gunfight, a knife fight, or if you're just debating somebody, you're physically sparring against that other person. They want to win and you want to win, you know?
So, what if there's no other person? What if it's life? What if it's the world that you're fighting against?
Well, those might require different techniques, but still you can learn things from the pressure that teach you how to deal with other things.
So now you're beginning to move pressure away from physical pressure to other definitions. And so now I'm trying to say I don't like using the word pressure to contain all those things that are the challenges that make you grow. And so I'm trying to think, is it, so I'm trying to grasp how to see the word pressure as that. You grew up in a poor family, your family never had much money, you never had the opportunity to go to college, and you want to go get a good education so you can get a good job, right? Those are, you can call them pressures, but that's kind of they're challenges. They're hardships. They're things that get in the way of something you want to do or something you want to be. And so
Yeah,
I'm trying to me, pressure is not quite the word I would use to describe all of those things.
yeah, that's because we haven't rolled around for 2 or 3 minutes on the mat. If we rolled around for 2 or 3 minutes on the mat, you're like, okay, now I understand.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's come to me in the last couple of times we've talked is that you often look at the interactions as person to person, like in debate,
Yes.
like in an argument, right? And
Yeah,
in
that's
fact,
what
what
we're
we
talking
talked
about. Yeah.
about, the ad hominem attacks and all that, requires a person on the other side.
Yeah, right, right.
And to me, it doesn't matter if it's a person or if it's life or the universe or what on the other side. You need to apply the same critical thinking to the situation, right? If the world is turned against you and you can't get anything done, you're going to have to take the emotion out and find a way to conquer it.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Same
That's
as a
a
person.
that's a that's a learned technique. So I think critical thinking will get you to the right techniques, But if you have the right techniques, I don't think you need any critical thinking at all. You just know, you know what to do. You see
Okay,
that
now we're getting
pattern,
into a
you
different
apply
area
it.
though. So you're saying you're building not a framework, but a flow chart, a plan, or whatever, a process by which you can short circuit the need for critical thinking. You can you would create it originally under critical thinking. Okay, you would
Yeah,
use
right.
critical thinking to create this process, this flow, this
Yeah,
activity,
right, right.
this set of actions you would take. But once you've done that, and this is something you've talked about, you learn it so well, you know when to apply it. You turn it on whenever you need it, and it gets you out of that
Yeah, because
situation.
you don't have time, right? You don't have the
Okay,
time to sit around and think.
so to me, you need that. No, whether you're arguing with someone, whether you're fighting with someone, where it's raining on you, and you've got to get somewhere on a certain time. No matter what the challenge is, you need to build a process, a well thought out process that gets you through that.
Yeah, yeah. You could call it a framework, a series of checks, a checklist, whatever you want to call it, actually. But yeah, you go through this process that's been well proven to deal with this particular situation that you're in.
So, does that mean critical thinking is not applied to every situation?
Oh, God, no, 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 no. Critical thinking comes first. That's your ability to have free will. But then you move that to your reptilian brain, right? Which it doesn't think per se, but man, it's way faster, right?
So
It's
this
super.
holds true with some of the other things you've said in the past, and but it doesn't connect quite to the way I've been thinking. The
Mm.
way I've been thinking is that I build these frameworks, these flows,
Yes,
and
right.
I am actually applying critical thinking in those steps.
When you're, well, let me tell you that I would think that if you're having to think about it at the time, any great deal, you haven't internalized it to the level that I would like it to be.
So I think quite often the things you're critically thinking about require variable inputs to make to come
Yeah,
up
very
with.
well thing. But I think that's part of the mastery is that you don't have to think anymore. Right? There's all these Japanese like flows like water, no mind.
So let's go back to something I mentioned to you that happened yesterday when I was waiting in line at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I was in line at the self check. Only two of the six registers for self check were open. One was
Yeah.
out of paper, and the other one had this woman who didn't seem to know what she was doing.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that story actually.
And
So,
so she took her forever to figure out how to pay. Right? And I'm sitting there standing there, and I'm like, first getting frustrated because I had a call with you coming up, and I wanted to get back at home.
yeah.
First, I'm getting frustrated. Then I'm like annoyed at her for not knowing how to do this. Come on, it's been years since we've had these things. You should know how to do this. Going through all these things in my mind, and I finally get to the point of why does it matter? Why am I so upset? I don't know anything about this person. I was making judgment calls like, what are they not smart? Are they what's up with them? And I started having these kind of negative connotations, judgments of that person, just
Yeah.
on the fact that I'm having to wait a few minutes in line.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And
And I
so,
wouldn't think, I wouldn't, okay, so here's my thing. I'm gonna come after you a little bit, right?
sure.
So my thought is I think you think that you were thinking, but you weren't thinking, you were reacting emotionally. Maybe there's a little bit of thinking in it, but I'd say most of that was emotional response. Did you feel anything in your body, like a physical state
So,
change in your
so
body?
tension over the fact that I need to get in the car and get home because I only had 15 minutes to finish up the transaction and get home because I was going to have a call with you.
Okay, so you were under some pressure then, right?
So I recognize that I'm feeling this, and then I say, well, why? It's because I'm waiting here, and I think I shouldn't have to wait. Okay,
Yeah.
so and then I'm going through this process of oh, this person's slow, and then I'm thinking, well, why are they slow? And I start off with the negative reasons why they're slow,
Yeah.
and then I start getting into, well, it could also be, she's having problems with the car. This is
Could
going
be,
on. That's
could be
going on.
having a
There's a
bad day
number of
today.
reasons why
Who
she's
knows?
just not at the pace I want her to be at.
Yeah, right.
And of course, it's the pace I want her to be at.
Of
Is the
course.
other aspect of it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
all those things go through my mind after I notice that I'm feeling tension because I'm in a hurry.
Okay, see, that's good. See, that's a good sign actually, because you felt it emotionally, like some physical feeling,
Yeah,
and then
it
your
only
brain
lasted
started
less
thinking.
than a second, I would say.
It doesn't matter how long. I mean, still though, you
Well,
can
that's the
think,
point. Is you need to recognize what you're feeling and then say, is this a good feeling? Is this a feeling I need to have? Why am I feeling this?
yeah, yeah, I would change the word good, but is this a productive feeling maybe, or is this valuable right now to help solve the problem?
Back to our earlier commentary that, I think feelings are only good when they add to add to you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends on how you frame things, but feelings could be good at any point. They could be positive, good feelings, which everybody likes those
Well, I
feelings.
think if a negative feeling drives you to act, then it's
Yeah.
actually serving a good purpose.
Well,
But if
yeah, yeah, as long as you pay attention. That's the whole idea of pain. Pain should be just a temporary thing to, hey,
uh,
something's wrong,
I said it drives you to act in a way that's beneficial to people.
Yeah,
If a negative feeling drives you to hit somebody, then maybe that's not a good.
yeah, right, right, right. Well, like anything, it's totally nuanced, but it's like when you're in that environment, you don't have a whole lot of time to think about it. So you pre say what's the scenario, and then how am I going to act in this
So let
scenario?
me ask you, in that flow that I talked about,
Yeah.
you're saying there is not critical thinking, or was I bringing critical thinking anywhere in there to the point where I got at the end like, oh, it's going to take time. I just got to.
I don't know. I mean, I can't, you would have to be a better person to answer that, but I don't think you're able to answer it because your
Well,
emotion is overruling your thoughts.
so once I recognized the emotion and started asking why,
Okay, that's good. That's a good state change, right?
right? Then I have to come up with why. I have to actually come up whether they're good reasons or not. Why? Because I'm here waiting behind someone who doesn't know what they're doing,
Yeah, right,
right?
right.
And and then of course I'm saying, well, is that really what's happening here? Is I'm really am I behind someone who doesn't know what they're doing, or maybe they know what they're doing, it's not working right. Maybe
Yeah,
the card's getting declined for some weird reason.
right.
All those options start coming into play,
Yeah.
right? To me, that is critical thinking,
I think you're thinking at that point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now,
right?
I think it's important though to indicate that it's not 100% here, 100% there. It's probably some ratios of things, right?
So I guess if we build a framework or tool that you're trying to get someone to disentangle the emotion from something, I'm
As much
looking
as
at the whole thing,
possible.
including all the critical thought process. So maybe the tool is this is always going to be the hard part. Divorcing the emotion in the first place is always going to be the hard part. Maybe
Yes,
that's the
yes.
tool that we need to build. That's what you need to have in your reptilian brain. You need to find a way to get your emotions out of the equation, and that's something that we can force or learn ourselves, train ourselves to learn. And
As
then once you're out of the emotion, then you kick in the critical thinking, and then we
yes,
give a framework of ask these questions.
yes, yes. And I think it's becoming physically aware of how you're feeling. So you may want to just think, just these are just off the cuff. Like for me, I can feel the anxiety feeling in my chest. It feels kind of like a tightness, right? I
Mhm.
can feel my heartbeat going up a little bit. It's like I might be sweating a tiny bit. It's like I might start shaking a little bit. And it's like these are all symptoms to me or signs to me that says, ooh, something is emotionally bugging me. Now, one
When you're
way,
running late and you get behind someone really slow in traffic,
yes,
and
yes.
suddenly you are emotionally upset
Yes,
because someone just is not driving as fast as you want them to.
as I want them to be. And that's totally normal and it's totally common. And you got to condition that out of yourself. And it just takes a lot of pressure to do that. I mean, a lot
When
of,
you're
sorry.
when you're self-aware enough to ask the question, what am I feeling and why?
Yeah.
Suddenly the need to be angry goes away, or the need to be frustrated.
Well, you now you're starting to think, right? Which is kind of cool. The lizard brain isn't in total control, right? It's like the frontal lobe, the free will part is actually starting to say, hang on, wait a minute, hang on, just a second.
The physical response was to a perception. You've now changed your perception, so your body doesn't need to respond in the same way.
Yeah, yeah, right, right, right. And you do that over and over and over and over again, and doesn't even bug you after a while.
But I think the tough one is like when you get an adrenaline rush at the same time. So
Yes,
someone slams their brakes in front of you,
yes,
someone cuts you off, something that really is a trigger, and you basically had your adrenaline went up to
yeah,
adjust to it.
yeah, yeah,
Now
right.
you are primed for all kinds of reaction and thinking, and it's about survival. It's not about thinking things through.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, jujitsu has a process that like they just apply a little more pressure, a little more pressure, a little more until you just until your first day, the pressure on your first day, in 6 months you start laughing at it. You're like, oh my God, seriously? That wasn't pressure. That was a love tap. This is pressure today. And so it's
Well,
just this slowly just keep upping it up, upping it up, upping it up a little bit.
well, and when you get to that stage, you still need to have empathy for the people at that first stage.
You must, and so if you can train yourself to do that, you can actually become a much better human being, right?
I remember my old company, in the beginning, we had a project we were working on. We were there 12, 16 hours a day for months at a time.
Yeah.
Right. And then so years later, I'm still at the company and these other projects start up and people are complaining because they have to be there 4 or 5 days a week, working 8 hours a day, or they have to do this, or oh, I had to work 2 extra hours
Yeah.
yesterday. And and they're playing their little violin asking you to feel for them. And you're coming from the viewpoint like, yeah, it's nothing.
It's nothing. It's
And
like
so
your dad.
how do you empathize with them to say, yeah, I hear you, and not be just so judgmental like you haven't done any of this
Well,
stuff
you
yet.
can be, and your first probably default behavior might be to judgmental asshole, right? And so you got to train that out of yourself actually, because if you're okay, so if you think of it in terms of like in this case, this is kind of extreme, but you think in terms of that you're the adult in the room, they're a child, they're just making thing. So you say, look, it's going to be okay, man. I know it's a couple acts, but we got to work a little. You can have a little bit of compassion to deal with them because the thing you don't want to do is this. This never works, right? If you ever get to this, make sure you got a bigger stick, right? It'll work then, but
So I think the one thing that dismantles you being a judgmental asshole,
yeah,
assuming that you're not knowingly selfish on purpose,
yeah,
right,
right.
is more information. In this case, more information from the viewpoint of someone else.
I think that would help actually. Yeah,
The
that
more
would
you
help.
know, in particular in that situation, the more I can put myself in the mindset of someone who's 10 years younger than me, the more I can, all that kind of stuff helps me to alleviate the kind of pedestal I've put myself on compared to you.
I think maybe information. Yeah, that sounds like such an analyst. Maybe
Yeah,
a little
I
more
say information,
compassionate,
but data, experience, understanding, all of that to
a little
me is just
understanding.
is
Yeah,
just more information targeted in a specific way, right?
yeah. I think whatever technique you use to get there, I think that's a really good thing to do actually, because you're like, wait a minute, maybe she's just having a bad day, you know? And it's
So
like, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, so like the thing where I was thinking, oh, well, why is she slow? And I'm coming up with the reasons why she could be slow.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it from outside, saying, outside of her, outside of me, what could cause this situation? That's
yeah,
my way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it might be, let me put myself in their shoes. What could
yes,
be causing this problem, right? At the end of the day, the resulting action is the same. It gets me to calm down and to
yeah,
have control.
yeah.
But sometimes it might be easier for you to put yourself in the mind of someone else than it is to theorize the changes in the world.
Well, and that's the essence of it. Who's the one seven? I don't know, but the expression somebody said it. Stephen Covey, I think. Seek first to understand and then be understood, right? Which is what you're doing. Like, wait, what's going on? Are you having a bad day? Are you okay?
Oh, so that's interesting because usually when you seek to understand, that requires interaction with someone. But we live in
Possibly.
a world where a lot of stuff's one way, where our perception is just what we see, it's just what we hear, there's no question and response. So how can you be gracious in your understanding? Yeah, I
Well,
think that's what I want to say. How can you be gracious in your understanding with limited input?
well, it depends on the timing of it, right? So if you're face to face and you want to kill each other, there's not a whole lot of time, right? You can't sit around on a whiteboard and think for 3 hours, right? Because it's over. But I know there's intentional things like an email is a beautiful tool to do this with, is if you feel yourself under pressure, you can intentionally slow things down, right? Which is a jujitsu concept. It's like, listen, you're like biting at the chimp or chomping at the bit to get something. And I'm like, I got to slow it down. I got to slow it down. I got to slow it down. I intentionally use techniques that slow things down. And these are techniques so you can get the other person in control, but maybe you're feeling a little agitated. So you got to slow things down. Like in sales, I swear to God, it works like a thousand. It works way better than it should work. But no matter what somebody's saying, if you don't know how to respond, just say, "Hey, can you tell me more about that?" And it's just say it. You don't even need to think about it. And it's like you just slow things down. You start to understand more.
Well, so that's in a scenario where, again, you're talking about human interaction, person to person, where there is back and forth.
It is back and forth.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can very easily say, "Tell me more," or "Tell me more about that," or I'm not sure I understand. Please, can you use
Yes.
different
Right.
words to explain the same thing?" All of those are ways to give them the opportunity to express themselves. And
Yes.
hopefully people are open to that, right? No, I'm talking about a situation where I was making a judgment call off of the actions I saw someone take.
Well, in that case, you got to still got to slow yourself down then, right?
Okay, but I think the idea here is it's not an expectation that there isn't an interaction that necessarily is going to make this better. What
Well,
it
it
comes
could
down
be.
to is me being able to act the part or think through the part of the other person in this
Well, yeah,
case.
and I think that's a real common thing called act your way to new thinking. I mean, what could happen is the moment you understand you're getting bothered, even if you're bothered, you could go up to with the right tone and just say, "Hey, do you need some help? It looks like you're kind of, are you okay?" I mean, that could change everything.
See, I use the methodology I think I use is like when I hear something that makes no sense to me,
Yeah.
I try to figure out how it could make sense.
How it could make sense to you. Yeah.
Right? So, or how it could make sense in a general sense. Like
Okay.
I mentioned to you yesterday that one of the things that Elon Musk found was $20 million a year, or $20 million spent to build Sesame Street in
Yeah,
Iraq.
right. Whatever. Yeah.
Right? And I was like, okay, that sounds dumb.
Yeah.
From the principles of, yeah, I want to make America strong. I want to protect America. Sesame Street in Iraq seems pretty low. So if I start thinking, how could that have gotten approved? How could that be? What would be the reason for doing this? And
Yeah,
the thought
right.
that came across to me was, oh, propaganda. Let's promote American values, American ideals. Let's say America, rah rah rah, we're great.
Yeah.
That then becomes an issue of safety and building security around the world.
Yeah.
Okay, that might make sense to spend 20
It
million
might
bucks
make
on,
sense. Yeah, it depends.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I've got a viable way that actually has a sensible, logical reason why we would do this action that doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to
Right.
us,
Right. Right. Right.
right? And then I could leave it at that and say, okay, it could be that it was a dumb decision or a smart decision. And I've got both of them here. And if it's a smart decision, then I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money, but I'm okay with it. If it's a dumb decision, I'm like, what the hell happened? And I don't know which one's right.
Yeah.
I could leave it at that and comfortably have two opinions in my mind, or I could take the effort of, if I really cared, to go find out more. And
Yeah.
that I did. That is what I did. So I
Yeah.
went online and I looked up what this show was, and it is in essence really Sesame Street. I wasn't like a generic term. It was Sesame Street
Okay.
in
Yeah.
Iraq, and it wasn't about promoting America. It wasn't about any of that stuff. It was about helping kids understand trauma and the world they live in.
Yeah.
In Gaza, or not Gaza, was it Iraq or wherever they live. And I'm like, okay, now you've just changed the purpose of it to be humanitarian.
Yeah. Right.
Not saying there's no value in that, but am I comfortable with $20 million being spent on that versus propaganda? Now I've got two different viewpoints in my mind. And so I'm going through this. This is how my mind works on a topic like this. Someone
Yeah.
else, you're going to hear people repeat that $20 million to Sesame Street. I've heard it so many times.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, but if I don't know the reason and all you're giving me is a one-line summary of what it is, I have no way to know if there was any logic behind it and if it was a poor decision based on
Yeah.
good ideas or not. Because implementation is always where things screw up.
Always. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not going to say always, but almost always, actually, because I hate saying 100% on anything. But yeah, I think that's right. And then maybe you start digging in more and you start to realize that, oh my gosh, they just channeled this in Sesame Street, but the people who did that got a $5 million kickback, right? Because the show only
Now,
costs
those
20.
are levels beyond. I mean, when you start getting into that level, and of course, we talked a little bit about this. Is like it's only $50 billion we're talking about, and we
Yeah.
say
Only.
only 50 billion,
Only.
but
Yeah.
it's still only 50 billion out of 6.8 trillion.
Well, yeah,
So
but things add up, right? Numbers add up. Just like personal growth, just like everything, just little tiny baby steps every day. That each step in itself is no big deal, but man, they add up.
it's a media frenzy, is what I think. It's the low hanging fruit. It's the easy win,
Yeah,
and I knew
yeah,
there
of
was going to be
course.
some of this no matter what.
Yeah.
My problem is you want to make lasting change, you go for the big stuff, and that's
Well,
going to
I
be tough.
think they're getting there. They're getting there.
They're going to spend all their time on lawsuits and all the stuff that's going on right now. He's only got 4 years to get this done. He's got to
Yeah.
show enough movement in 4 years to build a culture that accepts that this is the way we should be doing things in the
Yeah, who
future.
knows if he can do it
Which
or not?
means
I
if
don't
you want
know.
to do that, you need some big wins. These aren't big wins. I'm sorry. They're neat wins. They're obvious wins in my mind. And it's great that it's happening. It's better than nothing. but the sheer amount of media attention, the sheer amount of political strife this is causing for $50 billion.
Well, I mean, I don't think Trump cares about that. Trump, this is just his strategy. He's like, let me throw out something bombastic, get everybody all up in arms, and then at least they come to the table like, okay, let's talk about it. What's going on? But it gets them there.
The problem is, the problem is, of the 1.7 trillion we spend in Social Security, or I forgot what the numbers are. There's like 70%, 60% of our budget is already called for. Actually, I think
Yeah,
it's 60%, and then another 20, 30% for the debt payment.
yeah, yeah,
So when you think about that, Elon Musk's point and the president's point is, if you don't get the debt down, it's just
yeah.
going to get harder and harder,
Right,
because
right.
right now it's growing so much faster than the economy is.
Yeah,
Right. If the
problem.
economy was growing fast enough, then we could rack up debt for as long as we wanted to.
Yeah,
But
normally they look at debt as a percentage of GDP, right? That's how they
yeah,
typically.
but I mean, you look at pre-pandemic debt versus post-pandemic debt, and we're way up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's not 20% up. It's like 100% up. It's a huge amount of money.
But
So
but see, that's Trump's not selling that, right? That may be an outcome he's selling, but here's what he's really selling is look, these corrupt politicians have been stealing your money for 50 years, and finally they're gonna have to pay a little price for this. And
and
so
to me, everything in the statement you just said is factually wrong.
I understand maybe factually wrong, but I'm telling you the emotions are factually accurate. And so
You're right. The emotions are factor accurate. And again, we keep arguing we should take emotions out of this, and you keep pushing that. Well, we have to bring emotions into it to make change.
listen, if you're going to sell to other people, you better sell emotionally. I'm just talking about what you should be thinking logically, actually. And you might be emotional sometimes, right?
Oh, you're definitely going to be emotional. I mean, the whole point is to control the emotion so it doesn't get out of hand, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. To control and emotions are powerful. People do things for emotions all the time, actually.
Yeah, I just the idea here is I'm looking at it from what I consider a practical sense. He's got 4 years to make big change when
Well,
it
and who
comes to
knows?
this.
But he may start some. I don't know. And people don't really care about that. In fact, here's another thing people don't really care about that much is the fact that one of his promises that he was going to bring prices down. He's going to kill it. Well, it sounds like prices are going up even more, actually. So, but people are giving him a pass. He's like, well, I know he said that, but at least he's doing this thing that's really important to me. So
Well,
I'm,
part of that is you get a little bit of a grace period in the beginning
yeah,
of any
yeah,
change.
yeah, yeah,
It's the
yeah.
whole 100 days idea. What can I get done in 100 days?
Hmm.
That and the fact that he has taken a lot of action
Oh
is, I
yeah.
think, it puts a lot of people into a more graceful mindset as to allowing this.
Yeah, yeah, because he's at least doing something. He's finally, it's like, so the general sense is Trump is, and this is the way I think, and I know a lot of people, and because I've talked to a lot of people about, it, they're like, I don't really like Trump. He's just decisive, right? He's like he's a wrecking ball.
Decisive or divisive?
Divisive. He's divisive, yeah. He's a wrecking ball. He's a sledgehammer, right? And it's like I don't like that part. And at the same time, there's so much corruption. Maybe we need a sledgehammer to come in and just break things up?
So you say corruption. When you say so much, how much are you thinking? And secondarily, what is your definition of corruption?
Well, so I would think, oh, I gotta
This
go
is
on.
where when I hear this word thrown around, fraud, corruption, all that kind of stuff. Don't attribute to ill intentions what can happen by by just
Well,
what's
yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just repeating back what I hear on Fox News.
yeah, but you've got a brain. You don't need to do that.
I know, but I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. Yeah, there you go. Okay, you just busted me. See, that's pressure. That'll make me think twice now. Before I try that attack on you, you're like, not today, big boy. You're getting shut down today. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm not. He knows how to defend against that. So now I got to think of some other attacks. Um,
Never attribute to malice what you can attribute to ineptitude. Is that what the term is?
yeah, I
Incompetence.
don't know.
Incompetence.
But when you want to influence people, remember, and we should look at the exact stat up, but we're both analytical, and we're only about 10% of the population.
I get that, but
So
we're
we got to understand.
the 10% is what makes things happen in the world.
Well, I guess.
It actually makes the things happen.
But
The
yeah, I don't know
drive
the
to do it, the
analytics.
decision to do it, the willpower to do it comes from the emotional 90%. But the 10% who analyze are the ones who are the implementers. And when the emotion overcomes the ability for the implementers to do their work, you get crap results.
Yeah, no, no, I'm fair with that. But I mean, Musk is a pretty, analytical, non-emotional guy, you know?
He is, and honestly, all the attacks on him I find very silly because he's one of the few people who's actually telling you why it's important.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, why is it important to have these tracking numbers or asset numbers or whatever he calls it on each payment? I call them, um, what do we used to call them on all the accounting records? Your cost of accounts or
Cost accounting?
no, your book your gosh, why can't I think of this? It's all of your accounting codes that you use within a company. So, 011 is department for sales, 012 is department whatever. And
Oh,
then
you're
within
talking,
that,
hang on, hang on.
you've got
Chart of accounts.
expenditures and so you've got chart of accounts. Yeah, 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 right.
Yeah,
So there's this chart you've got to show how you break money down,
yeah, right.
which bucket it's coming from, which bucket it's going to, all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah,
that is just basic accounting. General accounting, generally accepted accounting principles,
yeah,
GAAP,
right.
GAAP.
Well,
Uh,
but that assumes though that you got good actors just making mistakes. I'm sure
Well,
there's
after
a ton of that.
Enron, we had the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which required big companies to go in there and make sure that they were following all the accounting rules and big punishments for CEOs and CIOs and stuff who didn't follow it.
Yeah,
And and they did. They followed it. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe trillions of dollars going into compliance for this. But
yeah,
what it did was it made for more confidence in the way that the accounting was done at these big
yeah. It's
companies.
probably reasonable, I think. But I mean, I
Why
know
doesn't
that
the government follow generally accepted accounting practice?
because they're
It's
the
something that's
government.
accepted around the world, at least
They
all
don't,
around the U.S.
they don't have to.
They don't
And
have to.
they operated by a different set of rules. Their money is not real. It's
Small
monopoly.
businesses don't have to either, but they still track it because that is good business practice.
Well, yeah, and they'll get in trouble if they don't do it or whatever. So
Yeah, well, the
it's
government
just
should be
not a
getting in
good.
trouble if they don't do it.
Well,
And,
that's what's happening. They're getting Elon Musk is running around with his little crew.
well, the thing is, it may be problematic
Yeah,
to have the government run this way at the top because it's way too big. But
yeah,
having each department run as a multinational corporation or whatever, multinational corporations I'm sure have all kinds of problems tracking all their money too. But they figured out ways to do it.
I think so.
And
Yeah, I guess. I know.
so every department should probably have some way of tracking. And then at a high level, you have a meta level above that where the federal government looks at the big numbers.
Well, and I'm assuming, right? It's probably bad to say, but that mismanagement of these funds typically is corruption, right? It's an evil intent. That's where my
Hmm.
mind goes. I know that's not necessarily true, but that's my default assumption.
Now, my default assumption is bureaucracy got out of control.
Yeah, that too, actually. Yeah.
So what happens is I've got to spend my money before the end of the fiscal year, otherwise
Yeah.
next year I get less.
That's
That's
just
a
standard
stupid
budgeting
move.
stuff. Yeah.
That's a
That's how
stupid
every
move.
company runs, though.
That's how companies often run, yes,
Yes.
right? But companies who are smart about it figure out ways around that. They figure out ways
Well,
to get money back. They figure out ways not to punish a company for a department for doing better one year than another. I mean, those are all things that companies who know what they're doing have factored in.
well, and that's another, maybe these are big concepts we need to go over. I see them on like radar charts or something, but then it comes into I just forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, never mind. Actually, like one big
Well,
one is non-selfish to selfish, right? Generous to selfish would be one thing. I can't remember what I was going to say on this, but this is,
so the other idea to me of bureaucracy is like I've got a rule on how to approve this money,
yeah, right.
right? And when it becomes a rule with no human judgment on it, right? And there's a problem with human judgment because you judge things different than I do, right?
Yeah,
And if
right.
we're not aligned on principles and values and stuff, our judgment might be different. You might say, I'm perfectly okay approving up to $1 million of spend on whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah,
no, 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 $100,000 or $10,000, right?
yeah, right.
There, so we have rules. And so we set up the rules. And then what ends up happening is people learn the rules and they learn how to not bypass, but to flow through the rule. So
Yeah, right.
suddenly things are getting approved that had anyone with common sense been in a position to apply common sense,
Yeah,
they would have been stopped. But Now that's not my job. That's not my job. And everyone in the way is like, that's not my job. I do this one little piece of this entire process, and
Yeah.
and I can even see that it's bad, but I don't have a recourse to point out it's bad because there's nobody responsible to call out the BS.
Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's bureaucracy. That's what
Yeah.
happens, and that's why the
That's
bureaucracy needs to be
a
there.
culture problem, right?
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is you get the one person who does care and they've got no way to do it, or they get yelled and screamed at by the people who don't
Yeah.
want the noise or the
Yeah.
problems associated with it.
Yeah.
Right? And that none of that is corruption. That is all just incompetence.
Just
Incompetence
incompetence
and a lack of ownership. That's the
and
other thing.
yeah,
You
human
need
behavior.
people need to feel like they own their part of the government. They
Yeah.
need to feel like, no, wait, when I'm spending money, it's taking money away from other things that could be that used for.
Yeah, but very people think in terms of that. People think,
How do
well,
you get them to think in terms of that? What are the
oh,
emotions we can tug on to make them think that way?
well, that's called leadership and vision, right? And typically the best way to do that is by creating an external enemy so that people start working together.
Well, that's to get alignment. But the vision is critical, right? I mean,
Yeah, but you have to have an external enemy. You have to have an external enemy to create the vision, actually.
so my problem is something like "Make America Great Again" is not a vision; it's a slogan.
Yeah, it's awesome. Whatever it is,
Ri-
it works like
No,
crazy.
but the idea is I don't know what that means. I know what it looks like at the end of it. I don't know what it looks like to get there.
Yeah,
And I think and that's why I like, are tariffs good or bad? It depends on what the goal is and what you're trying to do. And I would personally make the argument that they're bad. But I so if I were in a position to make a decision in government to make a decision, I may choose a direction different than where we're going because I don't see the Make America Great Again vision going through that path of tariffs, but through this other path over here.
yeah,
That's
that's
and that's
implementation. Yeah, yeah,
that's difficult. So I think different visions. The city on a hill was an interesting one.
yeah,
It was much more aspirational than Make America Great Again.
yeah,
Make America Great Again is like, let's recapture the old days.
yeah.
Uh, so which part of the old days are we recapturing? How are we going to go? Are we going to go back to the way it was, including all the crap that existed in the old days? Are we going to strip out the crap that existed in the old days? Because then maybe it isn't the old days anymore at that point. So
Well, people
America
don't
Great
think
Again to
they
me
just.
is a great slogan. It's a horrible vision.
Well, yeah, we could talk about that. I always get mixed up between vision and slogan. I mean, in that particular case, that is the vision, make America great again, right? It's saying a
That's
lot
not a
of,
vision. That's not a vision.
sure it is. If something,
Make me
okay,
make me 20 years old again.
if it's okay, listen.
I'm sorry, it's BS. There's
Okay,
no way I can do that because I wouldn't have the knowledge I have today. In which case I'll be a 20-year-old idiot again.
listen.
Maybe we want to be a 1950s idiotic America again. Is that what you're saying? No, you're not saying that. So it's a horrible vision because it doesn't give us any context.
Um, it doesn't
It's a
matter.
great slogan though. I will admit it's an
You know,
incredible
here's the vision, right? So the point of a vision is if you can get a large group of people to agree that's the direction we want to go again. And so make America great again is a beautiful thing, right, from a marketing standpoint, because it says, look, our best days are ahead of us. It's a very positive, aspirational message, but there's a lot of corruption going on, and we got to root that corruption out.
No, that's how you're interpreting it.
That's
I
how
can
I'm
interpret it as
interpreting it.
our best days are behind us, and we've got to recapture them any way possible.
Yeah.
That's a totally different reframe from what your statement is.
Yeah, well, that's the way I see it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but that's the point is how you see it, right? If someone who's obsessed with race culture, and they say "Make America Great Again," and go, "Oh yeah, you want to go back to the way we were in the '50s." The race
Oh,
structure, and
well,
suddenly it's not about this vision of America's prosperity and international strength. It's about race relations from the 1950s,
yeah, yeah.
right? What is it about Make America Great Again is the great that you're trying to make, and that is not spelled out.
Is it? Hang on a second. Hang on, I'm looking at Donald Trump website. Let's see if it's spelled out. Oh, the first thing is new merch. So he's selling merch. That's the
Anything
first thing
good?
I saw.
Is there anything good in there?
Hang on, I don't know. I didn't look. I was
I
thinking,
hopefully by next week you'll get the your T-shirt and I'll get mine so we can
awesome. So
show them off.
okay, so there's something called Agenda 47 on the website.
Yeah.
Read the official 2024 Republican Party platform here. Oh, here we go. Here we go. 20 core promises to make America great again. Hang on, I'm going to share a screen, okay?
Sure.
Okay, hang on. Let me move this out of the way. Got all this junk here. So here it is, Chris. 20 core promises. I don't need to seal the border, right? And stop the migrant invasion. So this is everybody's like, yeah, seal it up. Get rid of all those people, right? End inflation and make America affordable again, just like back to the 50s. Drill, baby, drill. Turn into a manufacturing superpower. Large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips. Defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. Prevent World War III. End the weaponization of, rebuild our cities. Will I make it without question? World Reserve currency. Fight for Social Security minimum. No cuts. Change the retirement. Yeah. Are you reading all these? Can you see it?
I'm reading them, and some of these are like okay, but are they really what I would call high priority items? No. Um, so then I would ask you the question of these 20 items, the average American supporter of Trump or the Republican Party, how many of them do they know about? I think they would generally agree with him.
I would think
Otherwise,
the vast bulk of them. Yeah, exactly. And they probably know them. I mean, I don't
you
know
think
that
they know that?
I don't know that there's anybody that voted for Trump. I'm sure there's somebody that didn't know he was going to turn Elon Musk loose on, this whole Doge thing.
No, I think most of them wanted him to.
Wanted him to. So it's not like so the problem is when the opponents say that, well, he wasn't elected. I mean, he kind of was in a sense, right?
Well, no, okay, don't even try that because you know that that's not factually true.
Well, no, I
What you
do
can
because
say
people.
is what you can say is you knew who his cabal of people were around him. You knew it was Kennedy, you knew it was Tulsi, you knew it was all these people, right? And so you knew the people that were coming with him.
Yes,
So
yes,
you
exactly.
voted for him and his judgment of the people around him.
No, no, not exactly. Um, I voted for those people as well too.
Okay, so if you're going to make that argument, because generally speaking, I don't think most people think of the president and except for the vice president, most people don't think of the ticket as anyone else. I think there were a few like what's his name who was under Nixon, the Secretary of State. Why can't I think of his name?
I don't know,
Anyway,
but see, the problem is though, is we're just spewing out facts like they're facts, and we have no idea actually. I'm just sharing my opinion with you. I'm just saying that, I don't know that anybody didn't know that he was going to turn Musk loose, right, on the government. In fact, not only did people know that, they applauded it. They're like, yeah, finally we're going to drain the swamp, or whatever terms he wants to use.
Kissinger, sorry, Henry Kissinger.
Henry Kissinger,
I think
okay.
I think there was a time when people expected him to be one of the appointees or the like, or when Karl Rove under Bush, or there were some people that we knew were going to be part of that group.
Yeah.
And some people may have voted because they supported those people. But in general, I don't think the people you choose for those roles are the reason people vote for for the president and vice president.
Maybe not the direct reason, but it definitely was like the package deal. There was no
Well,
surprise.
I think one of the good things that his selections did was they showed they were all very vocal about their opinion on things.
Very vocal. Yeah.
So what ended up happening was you knew what the party stance was when it came to vaccines, when it came to
Yes.
the food industry, when it came
There's
to
no
whatever,
surprises. Right.
right? And that's what actually pissed off a lot of the other side when they had to go through Senate confirmation hearings. Is those were the things that upset them because they weren't playing uh, a safe zone of not offending anybody in what they said.
Yeah.
They were
Right.
actually saying things that were on one side over the other, and I'm using both hands here to generate that, and that caused the people who were either in the middle or towards the other side to suddenly get freaked out.
Yeah. Yeah. They're freaked out. But I think for most people that voted for Trump, they're like, oh my God, thank God we've got some
But
rational
so
stuff.
I'm going to make the argument. You should not make the argument that you should not make the argument that Musk was elected. I think what happened was they knew that he was part of
The
the
part of the
resource
team, the dream team, whatever you want to call it.
part of the resources Trump was going to bring to bear, and
That's
that
right.
somehow he was going to get involved in the mix. That was, I think,
Yeah,
what it.
but here's what I'm arguing against particularly, right? The other side said he's illegitimate because he wasn't voted on, he wasn't elected. And that's their saying. And I'm saying, no, that's what you're saying is not true, actually. It'd be different if Trump just pulled somebody out that nobody ever knew before. That would be the scenario they're talking about. But
So who are the famous secretaries of departments under Biden?
oh man, I don't know.
All right, so then you could say, so do we have 15 heads here? Do we have any of them listed? Because I would say you could make the argument that none of them were elected because they weren't, so that they should have no authority to do anything because they weren't elected, but they were appointed,
They were
right?
appointed, right?
Now,
Exactly.
of course, he is a consulting third party, which throws a little bit of things into the mix. But I'm like Anthony Blinken, right, was Secretary of State, or Secretary Austin, Secretary of Defense. These are people you could argue that they shouldn't have be listened to, and they were inappropriate people because they weren't elected.
But that's the Constitution. That's the executive branch. He's got the power to elect. You can't vote on every single person that works for the government, you
And
know?
that's when we get into the argument of what's democracy, by the way.
Well, yeah, and it's so interesting. Oh, Chris, I gotta go, actually.
Oh, sorry.
It's
All
so
right. Well, we
interesting.
got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, no, no, wait. I gotta say this one last thing. Now you made me forget. I'm blaming you. Yeah, hang on. I don't know what's interesting. Yeah, we're done. We're done, Chris. This is awesome. And okay, I'm gonna hit the stop record. Any last words before I hit the stop button?
Stay curious. Be curious.
Stay curious. Okay, very good. All right,
Hear the
Chris.
piano.
That's great. All right. I'm gonna stop recording. See ya
All right.
later.